Once there was just men and nature. Then men came bearing crosses. We used to believe that we were the center of the universe, that the sun and the stars all revolved around us. And we spent the last 500 years since Copernicus in this slow crawl to where we are now, to this pinnacle of human achievement, where we finally bent nature to our will. We split the atom. We broke the fabric of reality. That's how far we've come. Now the lights of our cities stretch further than the stars in the sky. But the more perfect society gets, the more psychotic we become. We evolved through brutality. That's why we had teeth and claws. Self-preservation was the highest law. But as time went on, the pack began to provide for us, and we abandoned our violent nature. But it never went away. Laid beside us in our sleep, waiting. And as it waited, we became slaves to the systems we built. Now it's all falling apart. Soon our cities will be washed away by floods, buried in sand, burned to the ground. That's why you found me. Because you're no longer blind to all this.
All right. Hell yeah, man.
All right.
What is up?
Good to be here.
Hell yeah, man. No, dude, this is awesome. This is something I've just been waiting to happen, waiting to come into the ether. And months back, I guess, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months now, Matt from the Great Deception podcast, he hit me up and he's like, yo, I got this dude, he's been hitting me up. He sounds real legit. He's this architect, but he's into old world shit. It's crazy. And I was like, fuck yeah. He's like, dude, I'm gonna try and get him on show, blah blah. And I was like, oh man, this is it. And you're on. It was amazing. You've done a bunch of good shows with him, and yeah, you started your own channel, killing it. I love you're looking into Pacific Northwest. That's where you're at right now, right?
Yeah, I live right north of Seattle.
Right. So yeah, it's awesome. You're there. You could go check it out and discover.
Yeah, well, I mean, Matt's the one that inspired me to finally make the move and start my own channel. I'm a reluctant podcaster.
Yeah.
I don't even call
Totally.
myself a podcaster because there's so many people out there doing like awesome work. Matt is killing it, man. I definitely owe him a debt of gratitude just for inspiring me. But I do like deep dive research videos pretty
Yeah,
much.
man.
Yeah.
And they're great. They're freaking outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll probably get into it. But the main thing of why I'm so excited that you're in the scene is, you're a schooled architect. You've built shit, you've designed shit. Well, you've built shit since you were 15 years old or something like that. You said
Yeah,
before.
since I was a kid. Yeah, kind of grew up
Yeah,
with a
man.
hammer in my hand.
Totally. And me and Pat are tradesmen, not on that level by far. And so this is just exciting. It'll be fun to talk about. I think we're gonna be able to shed a lot of light on a lot of these questions that have been floating around in this research, you know.
Yeah, man.
Basements, electric architecture, all kinds of good shit, man. But so I'm stoked, man. I'm stoked to do this. And yeah, thanks for cruising on with us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Hell yeah.
Thanks, man.
Right on.
I don't know. You've definitely done the background check on Matt's show a bit, but I don't know if you want to just lay out a little bit of your history that you like, and then fucking, yeah, let's just get into it.
I mean, you know, in a nutshell, yeah, I've been doing architecture. I graduated in 2003, and I went back and forth for, you know, the last 20 years between building, was a contractor for a while, working for architects out here in Seattle. I started out I grew up in New Jersey. And back then I was working in the trades, but like informally, the guy with the pickup truck, you know, going around working for different framing crews. And but I got really lucky in high school. That's kind of where it began for me, like for real, because I took 3 years of architectural drawing, like old school T-squares and drafting tables and all that, French curves and, you know, sharpening pencils and like learning to do all that by hand. And
before CAD, the CAD program.
Yeah, way before CAD. Yeah, I didn't start CAD until I like got into college. Right. But that was like in the late 80s. So that dates me a little bit. But I also took 3 years of carpentry class, and I was making furniture. I still have furniture here that I built when I was like 15 years old.
Amazing.
So that's a nutshell. Like I've just been kind of like, you know, on both sides of the industry, like designing and building for, you know, for most of my life.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I had something to say there. Hold on, let me let the connections connect again. It's awesome to have like someone with your building experience like doing this work. I mean, it's amazing. It just goes to show that this architecture, there's questions, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
You know, for you to come through school and, you know, be building for all these years, and both of us as well, like, and then all of a sudden we're questioning all this stuff we've been even building for, you know, decades. It's a pretty, it tells like the truth of what we're digging into, I think, a lot.
Well, here's something that might interest you, and I've been kind of thinking about this for a while. Is my first employer, once I graduated back in 2003, I went to NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology in Newark. And my favorite professor, this fellow Jack Lebduska, he was like 70 at the time, and he was like an old school master architect. And he used to really lament that the accreditation exams, they removed the history section during his time.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, so that's just really interesting. So like the whole profession just could give a shit about the past, generally speaking. And there are exceptions, like there's notable exceptions, like preservation architects and people who do care. But as an industry, it's just like, let's just keep on plowing forward and call it progress.
Right. Well, I mean, I've seen that a bunch, just looking into the old buildings, like a lot of this stuff, even stuff that survives today, they don't even know who built it. And it's not, you know, barely 100 years old. You know, you'd think they would have kept the records around somewhere or something.
No, the lack of records is like, yeah, that's one of the biggest red flags there, is just like the lack of records. And there's always a different excuse, you know, it's
right.
The fires, or like in Seattle, it's like, you know, the downtown burned down in 1889, and every city's got another version of that story. So they lost all the records. And then they had a huge building boom where like these architects just came out of nowhere, and they have these really shady histories that nobody can really trace, and built like hundreds and thousands of buildings in like no time at all. Like 18 months, there's like 3,000 new buildings in downtown Seattle. And then like, you know, one architect, again, who you can't even trace his education or where he really came from, this guy Fisher in particular. And then what they say is then the economic depression, they call it, what do they call it? The the Great Panic, or the financial panic of 1893.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
everything shut down and all the architects lost their jobs and they all left with their records. So sorry, we don't have them.
Yeah. You were mentioning that like on the Great Deception, where also like what was it, like 20 million people went to Chicago during the scare, the panic thing too, to be at the World Fair in Chicago, where no one had money, but the 20 million people, right?
Right. That's exactly the same year as the Great Depression of 1893.
Yeah.
So it's very strange. Like when
That
you really
makes no
start to
sense.
scratch the surface, things just don't add up. And it really does surprise me that I stand out as being an architect looking into this. Like, why aren't other architects interested? I don't know. Like, people are busy and they just take
Sure.
what's in the textbooks for granted, I suppose. And it's not just the textbooks. It's like, you know, Louis Sullivan, who's like, you know, Frank Lloyd Wright's mentor, like he's got,
Right.
you know, like 3 autobiographies or something like this. And, you know, so it's, you start questioning it. And, you know, first of all, like we're going after sacred cows, like these revered
Right.
people, for people who actually care about history in the first place. And then we're questioning, you know, the legitimacy of this stuff. And, you know, so maybe it's just too tall a hill to climb for most people.
Yeah,
there's
no,
a
I mean,
there's
it's
a
hard.
there's a
Go ahead.
doctor's office that Frank Lloyd Wright's like intern like did down here in Santa Cruz, right off of Market Street. It's an all brick and it's kind of laid out in like a circle pattern. It was one of his one of his interns did it. So, and there's nothing really that special about it. It's all just brick buildings, but you know, the way they laid it out is just in this circle pattern. It just goes in a circle, like all these different circles. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if he was a student at like Taliesin or.
I haven't really like looked too much into it. I just you hear people say Frank Lloyd Wright's like intern did this one, and you know, you're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. It's just been there ever since I was a kid. But you know, like the funny thing about the architecture thing and the rebuilding of it, like there's like with the fire that happened at Notre Dame, aren't they having in France? Aren't they having problems with like figuring out who's going to like rebuild that, or what's going on with that?
I mean, last I saw, they're getting ready to reopen that in 2024. So
Okay.
I think they're kind of, you know, blazing forward with it. I mean, it'll never be what it was.
Right.
You know.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
just remember going,
sure.
oh, I wonder who they're going to have build that. Was there any like firms that took over the building of that, or was it state firm?
I'm sure it was like state run. I didn't follow it too closely. I saw that they like, you know, they brought in all these old growth oak trees to replace
Okay.
what, you know, it's like an oak forest in that roof. You know, that whole thing is really sketchy too. Like that was like, you know, large timbers of old growth oak that have been there for centuries. And it's just like, for that to burn the way it did,
Right.
very, you know, it's very suspect. And, you know, it just,
Like incinerate, and an incinerator may have been laid on it before. Maybe.
who knows, you know,
Yeah.
how do they, well, there's some assumptions built into that, but you know, I don't know, how did it go up the way it did is the question. And
Yeah.
what gets me about it, like that, it seems to me that they're turning it into more of a less of a sacred cathedral and more of a, you know, a tourist kind of touristy thing. Like they took the altar out, I heard, and that's
Whoa.
that's problematic from a
Yeah.
spiritual standpoint.
Right. And that's part of the old sacrifice of the building.
Yeah.
But you always have to wonder
Watching it
what
burn was a real gasp, though. You know, you're like, oh, you know, just like.
Oh, I'll never
that's-
forget, man. I was in Argentina with my wife at that time, and
Okay.
we were sitting in a restaurant, and it came on the news, and the whole restaurant was just like
Yeah.
quiet, like looking at the TV. Yeah, that was really intense.
Yeah, but I do. Do you think they had old plans, or do you think that they just kind of just took photos of like old photos and then kind of like put it into a computer? Or how do you think they got? Was it old draftsmen or anything like that?
It's a little bit above my pay grade, but I'm
Yeah,
sure they've got all those structures mapped out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that one is definitely like part of that, like that cathedral. It's like a beautiful cathedral, right?
Yeah, you have to wonder what they burned inside there too.
Yeah.
It's like you're saying that, you know, these fires, you know, it doesn't take that much to even just consider that all these old maps and plans, blueprints have all just
Yeah.
been burned on purpose in these fires. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the San Francisco fire, it just like, what's the name of that big, it's a skyscraper, really ornate. I've got a picture of it here, but I look at there's all these iconic photos of it burning on the top stories. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is that the North Beach right there?
What is
I'd
that?
have to see it.
Here, can I do a quick
yeah.
screen
Yeah,
share and
totally.
I'll pull it up?
Dude, 100%.
Because you're the San Francisco guys, and I've been.
There we
You
go.
see it?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's I forget. I can't think of what that is right this second.
But like, how
Oh,
does
it's the call building.
How does something like this? How is this caused by an earthquake?
Totally. I mean, totally. It makes no sense. The big, gigantic brick building. I mean, the whole thing with the San Francisco fires. I mean, it's two events. It was the earthquake and then a fire. Like, and even in like the actual narrative, it says pretty clearly that like the fires from the earthquake were put out pretty quick. The problem is these guys were, you know, trying to fire stop things by blowing up buildings, and those are the fires that swept over the entire city.
Right.
You know?
Same thing in Seattle. Yeah.
Totally.
And,
yeah, dude.
Seattle.
My jaw hit the floor when I was watching that in your video the other day.
Yeah.
And that was 1889, right?
1889. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 17 years before San Francisco. It's like a practice run.
I mean, it's really suspect history, because on the one hand, so just in Seattle, like the apparently the mayor took over as fire chief because there was an interim fire chief. The actual fire chief happened to be out of town at the time. So like the command center was coming from on high. And so that's the guy who's not a fire chief was making the call on which buildings to blow up. And so you kind of insert that into the picture, and it's like, well, how do we know they just weren't in there blowing stuff up on purpose?
Oh man, dude, it's the same story with San Francisco. The fire chief was basically mortally injured in the earthquake. And so the guys who took over were too dumb to like figure it out. So they just went around blowing shit up. It's the same fucking thing.
So sketchy. And then like, also in Washington, Ellensburg and Spokane burned a month apart from Seattle. And so within 2 months, you had three really, key cities in the Washington territory burned down, just the downtown. Each of those were contending to be the capital of the new state. And there just happened to be a state convention going on, or a convention for statehood going on at that time during the summer. And then Washington goes from, a territory and becomes a state.
Right. It almost sounds like a war story.
It almost sounds like it? Yeah.
Totally. And I mean, and plus, I mean, that port is like so crucial in the whole world trade thing, like controlling that port is major, big time.
And that's just, you're making me think of it too, because you're right. And I just did that part one of the deep dive into Port Townsend. And you gotta come around the Olympic, like if you're coming up from San Francisco, you'd have to go hook around the Olympic Peninsula and pass by Port Townsend, hug that coast, and in order to get down into the Puget Sound to Seattle. Yeah, so it's all tied together.
Totally. I mean, there's a bunch of.
Did Michelle Gibson just do something about Port Townsend?
She did a focus on Port Townsend. Yeah.
She had some interesting things to say about it. It was supposed to be like the biggest port city, like on all of the West Coast. And then it fell to those fires happened, and then something happened with that where they just moved it away from there. It was supposed to be the capital as well, or something like that.
I didn't know Port Townsend was going to be in the contention for capital, but
Oh.
yeah, regardless,
Yeah.
it's the strategic location.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Gibson does fantastic work. I also came upon another podcaster, Old World Explorations, if you've heard of him. He's been doing like really incredible work, looking at, he had a big expose in Port Townsend as well. So yeah, it's
cool.
great to see people, really digging into this stuff and comparing notes and,
Big time. It's a collaborative effort for sure. Freaking that's how we're gonna win this, is all working together and figuring this all out from all angles.
So how did you guys get into doing this research and digging into San Francisco?
Well, before we answer that, we got a commercial break here fucking coming up. Oh yeah, Pat, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, for sure. Well, how I got into like this research was like a gradual, I'm sure like for you guys too, but I'm a contractor. So I was doing work all up and down California. And I got up to Redding, California, and I started hearing some of the locals up there talk about Lemuria. Ever heard of Lemuria?
Yeah.
And Shasta and up there. And it was really interesting, like the folklore that was around it and stuff like that. So that's kind of like was in 2003. That kind of like started piquing my interest. And I kind of did as much as I could about Lemuria before I was just like, all right, yeah, like you start realizing that like a lot of people know about Lemuria, right? It's made itself into like popular culture and stuff with songs. And so you just kind of put it on board. But then what really ended up igniting like my real interest was a book called Cadillac Desert. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, where it starts talking about like how they built the aqueducts and Mulholland, and that's what really kind of started triggering me a little bit. Like I'm like, oh wow, there's like something deeper. There's like there's an effort to terraform like the Southland, and then the state of Jefferson and all that stuff from being up in Northern California. I'm like, there's like this history that's not taught, right? So it really my interest was like, oh, okay, cool. It's really coming from Lemuria, the state of Jefferson, and this book, Cadillac Desert. And then just like, that's how I started getting into it. And then when I started hearing about mud flood and like the Capitol buildings being dug out and all this stuff, and that's kind of like about like 4 years ago when, I kind of just watched Andreas Exertus and like his like Tartaria stuff. That's what really I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of people talking about this now. So that's basically how I got into it. And then it's just been like kind of a lifelong thing with like looking at architecture, kind of like knowing about Frank Lloyd Wright and like all these different things and the missions, because all the missions have been moved, all the history's been just changed around, and Starfort's kind of popped up, and the mud floods, and like how in California they teach you here a lot about like the gold rush and stuff like that wasn't adding up, and then just living in like the San Jose area, the mercury mines. So that's how I got into it. Like there's a lot of ghost towns in the hills that you just walk across, and you just start reading the signs and just getting like feet on the ground, kind of just looking at it, Yeah, that's basically how it happened for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well,
and then just being an all-around conspiracy theorist too, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's what I started as. I mean, I think, early 90s, getting into punk rock and just questioning everything, at JFK, there's a lot of good stuff, and I pretty much getting into punk rock, like I already was convinced the government was lying about everything. Like it didn't take Tartaria or the mud flood to believe that, and so that, that helped when I came along this, and just over the years, I've just you know, gone down various rabbit holes that have popped up, you know, whether like, you know, space and Bigfoot, I've done tons of paranormal stuff. Like, you know, just every, you know, every rabbit hole possible, super soldier stuff, you know, all the fun stuff. I watched X-Files in high school and whatnot. And I was introduced to the mud flood, and it, you know, it was really cool, but it was like, wow, this is like, even before I even like understood anything about it, I was like, well, this is a game changer, you know, like this means everything is wrong, you know, and it so it took a while, you know, for that to slowly like sink in, you know, and like you couldn't really search anything at the time about it. And just I came across I mean, it had to be like John Levi has a bunch of San Francisco videos. There's one of those, and it was like just seeing all the stuff he's talking about, like, oh man, I see that like almost every day. You know what I mean? Like, holy shit, like it's right there. And that's really like it just kind of really clicked. And that's when I, you know, fucking went through all his shit, all the Zerda stuff, like Pat said, is like all that early Mormon Tartary video, all his stuff was just amazing, still is. And, you know, I mean, everything just, it hasn't like clicked together, but a lot of the things I've been into, just even from, you know, esoteric stuff, philosophy, astrology, like so many pieces of everything kind of fit in this puzzle, you know, from like building stuff, tradesmen, and all this kind of stuff, you know. And for some reason, like, you know, I've always been like very private, like, oh, extremely, not very private, I've been like extremely private and paranoid person, you know. I haven't really put like my shit out there at all. And just for some reason, like I just like felt like I have like I could like I need to do this, I guess, or like I have something like I can contribute. And it's really been like a process. It's been a long, growing, fun, amazing process ever since then, you know, basically. I'm having more fun than I've ever had. I'm learning more than I've ever had. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. People talk about the shit being a psyop, like, whatever. It's not a fucking psyop, but even if it is, it's the best fucking funnest psyop ever. You know what I mean? Like, to get the fuck out of here. So yeah, that's just kind of got me here. And I don't know, man. I just like really believe like we're digging into some cool shit.
Yeah.
And this is just amazing, you know, like, yeah, this is awesome. This is
The
awesome.
whole
Yeah, I know.
psyop thing is like a hall of mirrors. And it's
Totally,
like,
man.
for me, I just decided early on when I started looking at like the Egyptian and the Peruvian megalithic architecture way before I got into what's going on right in front of us. And for me, it was like the stones don't lie, you know, just
Right.
listen to what they're telling us, because they're telling us a story. Whatever they write in textbooks, whatever they put, you know, ink on paper, to me is like second place to what the actual buildings, brick and stone, physical, tangible, you can see it, you can go look at it, and then you compare it to what they say, and it's like it makes sense or it doesn't.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've learned so much just from like going somewhere and seeing it and touching it and just vibing off it, you know?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, it,
like,
it always blew me away though, like how like you can drive by any of those engineering feats, like the aqueduct going through like, out to like, Fresno. You drive by one of the greatest engineering feats in like modern history, and people just like drive by at 90 miles per hour and don't even like look over at it. I was just like, yeah, that's pretty amazing that they're making water go uphill through gravity, like shaking it up. It just that's
Wow.
the psyop, you know what I mean? That you can't even like take like 15 minutes to be like, whoa, that's how that's working.
Right. You're right. That
Yeah,
is the psyop. It's that our attention span is just like, you know, we're
yeah,
just like on a hamster wheel and just keeping up with the next thing we got to do and pay for.
Yeah.
Totally.
And
Sometimes
it's,
just sit and think, take it in.
Totally.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it, this is just the next, this is just a thing. It's going to be on to the next, they're making it sound like this thing, and it's only been growing, it's only been fucking growing.
Yeah, the cat's out of the bag. I mean, they'd have to shut
Totally.
down the internet at this point to keep.
I think
Right.
I think they're actually working on that.
I know I
mean,
should be careful what I say.
Yeah.
it's
I
about
mean,
the only
yeah.
way they could stop it right now, you know what I mean? At
Mhm.
least
Yeah.
for the moment, for the
And
moment.
that's
Like,
the thing for the moment. I mean, it's just, I think the awareness is growing. There's just, there's a rising level of consciousness. And, at some point, might hit a critical mass and then they'll have to hit the reset button again.
right. I
Right.
mean, I don't see them being able to spin their way out of this without, some kind of event happening, starting us over,
Well, they're busy at that too.
100%.
Could I show you guys, share screen one more time and show you a map that I just found that's blowing my mind?
Yeah, dude, let's
What is
do
it?
it.
It's a map from
Okay, cool.
1868. So this is like just what we're talking
Hell yeah.
about. Let me pull this up here. It's your hometown. Let's see. Is that coming up for you?
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
That's not the one. Hang on a second. Is it? No, hold on a second.
I almost had to get up. Check this out.
Did I lose it? This wasn't the one. We'll have to edit this out of the video.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, it's all good. Just you still have it in there or no?
I'd have to look for it again.
Okay, all good.
Now I'm gonna have to do a video just on that, just to show you what I was gonna show you. It's a map from 1868. It's hand drawn, but it's in really high resolution, and it shows 1868. Like, I can't even count the number of cathedrals in San Francisco.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Totally.
like you're telling me in 1848, like 20 years before, that was some kind of a mining operation, like a gold rush town, and
Like
wasn't
an
settled?
outpost on the coast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't even, the funny thing is, wasn't even a gold rush town. It was the port that led to the gold country, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Here,
a big misconception too.
let's do this
like,
instead.
Okay.
So it wasn't in San Francisco, wasn't the actual gold rush center, the location of the actual.
No, I mean, they first discovered gold like up in, well, the nugget that like set off the gold rush was found up near Sacramento and Sutter's Fort.
That's the story. There was a nugget that set off the gold rush. Okay.
Pretty much like it's like a huge one.
So this is from, I think, 1870.
1877.
1877.
Yep.
So this is not even 30 years after the gold nugget was found.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely built out.
Yeah.
That makes absolute no sense.
I mean, what's going, and not only does it make no sense, like this isn't 30 years of development again with, cathedrals and castles, and
you don't see a fucking crane in sight, nothing.
You don't even see a person. I mean, I've stared at this thing for hours and I found like 2 horse carts.
Yeah,
These
there's
streets are empty.
totally.
And what's really weird is that the sidewalks are all like wood clapboard, but it looks like they're brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the housing stock and you get things like this, these weird elevation changes where this house is down there and they put up like retaining walls all around.
You'd never like want to build your house like that.
There's even trolley tracks.
Totally. I mean, come on.
Like, look at this retaining wall. Here's a 3-story, something. And then there's this retaining wall that they just kind of shoehorn. And this looks like all new and fresh, at least up top.
Mm-hmm.
Use clapboard sidewalk. Like, it's like an Etch-a-Sketch. I don't know. It's so weird. It's like the city was emptied out. And then some crew came in here and dressed it all up like a movie set.
Yeah, there's
And
a lot of questions for sure.
look at this. Look, check this out. So you get all this kind of like, I mean, it's mud, right? Silt, and
Yeah,
just kind of like,
yeah, they're totally just,
and then there's a wooden
washing that shit
retaining wall
up.
here, and then they got the Truman Show in their backyard.
Yep.
Right.
And there's if you go back to those the more muddy parts, and that's like going up on Nob Hill. There's another version of these photos, and it's kind of hard to find. Where keep going a little more. Okay, right
There's
there.
the horses.
So right in front of this big mound, like on the street, yep, right, like where that cart is and shit. Yep, right there. There's like ruins on the street, like it's rubble ruins, like it's not stacked like it'd be a construction site. It's not even stacked like it'd be demo. It's like straight up ruins in the street, like a bomb went off or something. It's really weird. And there's people in those photos, like looks like they're kind of like meandering along the rubble, kind of. It's kind of, there's not really much direction. I think there's a little bit of, construction going on in these two mansions right there, but it's just like scaffold work. You can't really tell anything.
Again, like 30 years in all
Yeah,
of this.
totally. And not to mention, like, the story, like most of these people, like, first of all, like not this many people got rich on the gold rush anyways, like these aren't all gold rush millionaire houses that they fucking mined in 2 years in gold country and came back and built a mansion, like it just doesn't even make sense. Like why all these people are even here. Like if there's just a port town leading into gold country, like why is there all these huge gigantic permanent structures? You know what I mean?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
And yeah, and I love you got the, these Antiquitech kind of antennas sticking up everywhere. And
yeah, those are popping up a lot in this photo.
They must have really been into their flags and banners back then.
Yeah, totally.
So I mean,
they just needed that weather,
like this,
man.
and this is like a smoking gun. Like I don't see how you can look at this and not just conclude that the textbooks are just wrong. It's just this is not possible in 30 years.
It doesn't make sense.
Look at this.
Yeah. Not to mention during that 30 years time, there was a civil war that apparently like stopped everything. And you know what I mean? Like this is all being built during the Civil War too. There's a civil war going on. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
draining resources, blowing up cities on the other side of the country. Yeah, just laying
like
somehow.
I mean, that's a lot of these mines, which were pretty shitty anyways, like stopped operations or after like the Civil War, they all stopped operations because they didn't fucking need that shit anymore. So they say.
I mean, that building dude, right back there on the left is like humongous, like A-frame like there.
Yeah.
Totally. That's like 2 city blocks.
It maybe even more, man. Like, and like you gotta like go, okay, what did they build it? Like a roof like that would have to be metal, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be wood.
Well, yeah, I mean metal, wood, and brick and cement for sure. But like, first of all, they were chopping down all the trees and everything too. But where are these resources going? Are they going to gold country? Are they going to the city here to build shit? What like it makes no sense. Like it's not easy to get the woods from even Marin. Like this was pre-bridge. They had to boat it across the bay,
Well, yeah, getting redwoods out of the hills too. I mean, unless there was trains, and I don't see like a lot of trains depots there. Usually that would be something. I mean, by boat maybe coming into the bay, but then like the not having people around is kind of like a big thing there.
And there's no construction going on.
Yeah, no, it's really eerie. And I'll show you one just by way of comparison that I found for Port Townsend, where it's you know, it's the same kind of thing. Like, how is it that there's a photo? Is this one? Yeah, this is it. So this photograph, and I took, you know, I looked through Port Townsend's city archive, Jefferson County, through University of Washington Historic Archive. And, you know, I'm just going by the dates and that as they're marked. And this was dated 1890. But all of these buildings, and I went through it in detail in that last video, all of these buildings were supposed to have been built in 1889, in 1890. So, but they're here. Like this is this is not a construction site. These buildings are already here.
Busted.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, dude. I mean, yeah, that's a smoking gun right there. I've wanted to do this with San Francisco after 1906. It's just like a tall order. There's a lot. There's a lot of buildings and stuff, but
yeah.
I mean, I know that the thing is, I know it's would be worth it because there's going to be these anomalies, you know. I know there will be these kind of anomalies because I know it's bullshit. Like right there, it's already. So how's that?
It'd be great if you did, but yeah, it's a huge amount of work. And I just on the Port Townsend one, I probably spent 100 hours just researching and then recording and editing and
easily.
It's just a ton of work. But what's really great about the Northwest is that the history is so recent. You know, like I came from Newark and there's, you know, it's 350 years of history. So it's like be really hard to kind of pull apart and, you know, tease out like what came first and what's really true because the Dutch were there, you know, centuries ago. But here it's
right.
They start the clock at 1850, 1851. You know, and we already had photography at that time. You know, so there's a lot of records to look, you know, to go back to the beginning and see if it adds up, and it doesn't.
Totally. And you know, it only, you know, 100 hours is a ton of work.
It's a lot of work, man.
And, yeah, in the grand scheme, you know, like it only took 100 hours to like, you know, poke a hole in that one. You know what I mean? Like, if only there's people have more time, or if only we have more time, like fuck yeah. And that goes back to, you know, that's just, you know, like we're saying, that's the actual psyop is to not, they don't want us looking at this shit.
Well, they got, you know, it's funny. San Francisco has a folklore of like the last emperor, a guy that lived in San Francisco. They called like the last emperor. He was like the folklore
Edward Norton.
of the time. Huh?
Norton.
Yeah.
Emperor Norton. I said Edward Norton. Emperor Norton.
Yeah. So it's like strange. I mean, like, you know, I get a lot of my like thoughts and theories from like when I hear folklore. I almost believe it, you know, to the point of like prove me wrong on folklore. You know,
well, they've proven a lot that they turned the history to folklore, you know, to like, you know, turn us off the trail.
Yeah. So, I mean, even with stuff like that, you kind of go, well, you know, like, who knows how old he was, you know? It was just this, it's like this strange, it's just strange that folklore kind of like hits right at the end of where the story that they're trying to like tell you begins, right? You know what I mean?
What's the story of the emperor?
It's just that it's just like he was just considered the last emperor of like San Francisco. And there's just like, you know, there's not a whole lot written about it, but you know, he was like arrested. He was like the sheriff like let him loose because, you know, just that's the kind of folklore. But it's written down in it's just written down. It's not taught or anything like that. You'll get it on like the last page of like histories and stuff, like back pages of stuff, like when you're reading it. Yeah.
He's basically just like,
he was considered like crazy. I mean, but then, you know, San Francisco has its own, it has like the Sutro guy was kind of like, you know, there's a bunch of like characters like that would just pop up and you know, the whole area is like filled with folklore. Like there's this town called Nigel, like in Fremont. It was the first Hollywood. All the train stations. Niles. It was like the first Hollywood, Charlie Chaplin. It was like Charlie Chaplin's studios there. It was the first Hollywood, and then they moved all that to down south. And there's just a bunch of history in California where they mix it up. And you know, especially in the South Bay, where there's the largest mercury mines in the world are like in Spain and in San Jose. That's why it's the San Jose Mercury News. And then you have the Roja Krishna that it's all kind of just like muddled together, where a lot of folklore and history are just kind of like living together in this weird thing.
Emperor Norton, if you want to, do you want to hear about him a little bit? Do you have him in this book? He was just like this Freemason dude who like cruised around saying he was the emperor, and they kind of basically he said he declared himself Norton the First, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. That was in like 1854, I think. He was just kind of a character of the city, I believe. He kind of made up his own laws that he just kind of followed. They just kind of let him get away with it. It's kind of one of those like Mark Twain-y kind of fairy tale type characters, you know, like what Pat was saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it folk? Is it real? Like, you know, intersects all these real places, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Who knows? What are they even trying to say?
I'm with you on the folklore. I mean, holding a lot of truth in at least as much as, you know, the sanctioned history books at this point. You guys familiar with the Thunderbolts project?
No, I never heard it.
If you're into like the electric universe stuff, electric universe theory, it's like a great place to go for primers on like actual plasma physics. And it's a whole different alternative view of physics, but starting with acknowledging that the ether is real. And for me, it helps me to be able to bring spirituality back into science and to understand that, you know, this antiquitech could actually be manipulating etheric energies and like actually like connecting a circuit between heaven and earth and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But I bring that up because one of their founders, this guy David Talbot, his focus was on comparative mythology, and basically went through the sacred texts, you know, around the world, and pulled out all these like archetypes and symbols that if you kind of put it together and accept that actually it's telling a story that we should listen to, you know, there's so much truth in it that points to let's say like you know, you have Indra and you have Thor, and they each have, you know, they're from supposedly different times and different cultures in different parts of the world, but they're both carrying these tridents, you know. And what are these tridents? And then there's stories of like the thunderbolts of the god. And the, you know, the Bible talks about mountains being cast down and, you know, valleys being carved out. And then they actually have physicists with like real backgrounds in electrical engineering and things like this, and looking at something like the Grand Canyon and like getting into the work of Velikovsky, who talked about how like planets actually, we don't have this static solar system, you know, that the planets actually move you know, in relationship to each other. And when they get too close, there's like electrical arcing, plasma thunderbolts that actually like when you grab a doorknob and you get a you know, shock. Well, plasma phenomena is fully scalable to the microcosm, to the macrocosm. So what happens, you know, at that small scale can also happen, you know, if Mars got too close to the Earth at one point, well, you know, there could have been arcing that happened, and then they dive into the actual land formations and like Google Earth and such, and like study it from the point of view and compare it the point of view of Yeah, like plasma physics, and like, and then they'll show pictures of arc welding and show like the exact same kind of phenomena, like the craters on the moon, for instance, like how they're like pancake. They're not like, you know, craters that you would think of from impact, but they look like arc welding blisters.
Right. Yeah.
Like the Richat structure that people like to talk about is Atlantis nowadays. The Eye of Sahara. They had a expose on that as far back as 2005. It's on their website, where they talk about how that's a fulgumite formation from a plasma outburst.
Oh yeah.
And it's just so fascinating. So, but you getting back to the comparative mythology piece, you know, we have all sorts of stories from antiquity about the thunderbolts of the gods and, you know, wars in the heavens between the gods. And so, yeah, I think there's so much to be learned from that to apply to what we're focusing on now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like with the light, with lightning happening over volcanoes and like before earthquakes and stuff like that. Like, you know, I always find that really interesting. You know, like the Earth is kind of like talking to the ether, and it's just we're shifting, we're doing this, we're releasing this energy. You know, like there is like a lot to the electric universe, right? They're communicating through electricity, big time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, whenever you like, because just a few years back we had like lightning, like super bad lightning, caused a whole bunch of fires, right? And it was like loud, and like you could just like go outside, and it was just like it was almost like you did kind of feel like you were like a first human watching the sky just break open and just like communicate. You just knew something was happening. You just like, it was like you were scared to be there looking at it, but at the exact same time you're like, whoa, man, they're communicating. You know, it's kind of
very
out
primal.
there. Yeah,
Yeah,
you just sat there
for sure.
You know, everyone in the neighborhood was like just looking at each other. It's like 3:00 in the morning. You're like, I don't know what's going on. You know, it's amazing. It's just like spark, and it was different colors too. It wasn't like, you know, like a flash, you know, like a lightning bolt. It was just like, you know, it was just like, then there was tons of fires, and it was stormy and stuff like that. But like, yeah, like the other electric universe, how electrical, like gravity in itself works different in different parts of the world. I don't know. It just, you know, different like Peru has a different version of gravity than like Newton's law, you know.
It's not a constant, in other words.
Yeah, it's you know, and it's there's just so many ideas on it.
The same with the speed of light. Like light slows down apparently when it travels through water, like a denser medium, and then it speeds up again when it gets to the other side. So
yeah, there's like that whole thing going on, the theory of everything, where you know, what is everybody's working on like a problem that they can't solve, and they have to create like special gravity and chaos theory and stuff like that on these like small versions. And then other people are like, oh, that problem's never going to be solved because you keep on having to make up math. You know what I mean?
Mathemagics.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You know, so the theory of everything. Yeah. Well, it's just like, you know, it's getting closer and closer to being like just busy work, I guess, you know, like out there for like the quantum mathematics or something like that. So
yeah, you got the quantum physics versus the string theory versus relativity.
String theory.
Nothing seems to, you know, work together. So they just add another dimension and just keep plugging and chugging. You know, you're working off of a grant, so why rock the boat?
Yeah, totally, that's exactly it. And you know,
basically give the answers that they want to hear, and you still have a job until the next one.
Well, just as long as it confirms there's no free energy, is like
exactly.
You know
exactly. I mean? Yeah, you're not getting a grant for that one. You got to come up with your own money to.
If you prove that it's free energy, and then it's just like the game's over, right?
Right, and it's probably illegal too. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you start to get too close to the target, and you know, but I do think that this whole like modern interpretation of physics, you know, it's first of all, it's theoretical, and science used to be based on experience and experimentation, observation and experimentation, and direct experience, right? A child could understand it. You didn't have to have an advanced degree to understand, natural phenomena, but they made it theoretical and made it so only the high priests and the mathematicians could, even have a conversation about it. You got
Right,
somebody
man.
like Michio Kaku, and it's like, no, there's 11 dimensions, and it's like, it's not helpful.
Totally. I mean, we're not even.
They just want the chance to look at your work before they tell you it's worthless. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
But we're not even like part of that convo though. Like, we're not looking at their works until we happen to come across it. Like they're having all these arguments with each other on their papers and whatever sources, whatever. But like, we're not part of any of these things. Like, we only hear about it if we search it out, and the mainstream media just releases what they want us to.
What they want
believe.
us to focus on.
Yeah, totally.
Because they'll never acknowledge that the ether's real. They spent the last 150 years denying it.
Right.
As soon as that gets out, the dam breaks. And I think that's where we have to start from. And I do think that's what we're doing when we're looking at Antiquitech and scratching our heads, like, how do these radiant fireplaces work to heat these enormous interior spaces? They weren't burning wood in these fireplaces. There was some other thing going on. And I think I really do believe that that's sort of the missing link, is the ether's real, and back when they knew how to manipulate those forces, and steeped in alchemy, and it was just understanding how the elements work together.
Totally. And I think they still do know how to do all that shit, and I think they still are doing all that shit. They're just on top of the hydroelectric dams and everything else, like, they're just compounding profits essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look at one photo of CERN and like the magnet technology that they have and what they're planning to build all over the world with the magnet technology, and you just go, what the hell are you guys doing? It's like the magnets are humongous. They're electrified. They, the power that they harness is just
electromagnetic.
You're probably right. They know exactly what's going on, and they're just keeping it from us.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
Hey, we gotta take a commercial break, and
blast the tartar sauce.
Well, hey, dude, fucking before we get derailed too hard, and before I forget, I gotta ask you these questions. So bear with me. It's kind of a 2-pointer, but I think I gotta ask them both at the same time. So basically, so basements. So for part one of the question, what did they teach in school about basements? Did they say it was a good idea to build windows on the ground floor where rain could come in, et cetera, et cetera? And then part two of the question is, a professional opinion or just a professional answer. So when you're building on the side of a hill, is it better to build a pad up to get level for the foundation, or would it be better to blast into the mountain to bring the level down? So
okay,
all right. On you.
As far as what they taught in architecture college about basements, there's not a big, like, there's architecture history class, but a lot of that is focused on styles. And usually the architecture history professor doesn't have a lot of building experience. And that's not a slight, they're just more theoretically focused, like they're academics for the most part. In my university, there was like one professor, I mentioned his name before, who had actual building experience, who actually worked in the field. Like, a lot of them aren't even practicing architects, let alone builders. Yeah, a lot. I mean, for the most part, they're strictly academics. They went through the graduate school circuit, got a master's, and then started doing a TA or something, and just kind of worked their way up through academia. That's the general rule. And then there's the exception, who were actually at one time or another practicing architects. So they didn't have a lot to say about basements. I remember this fellow Jack Lebduska, he was my beloved professor and my first employer, and he used to laugh because the head of the graduate department called him once and is like, hey, he wanted him to critique his drawings for an addition on his house, and in his building section he showed gravel underneath the footing, and my boss was like, you don't put gravel under a footing, you put a footing on undisturbed soil, right? You don't disturb the earth. You don't need to put gravel where it's undisturbed. The footing goes on terra firma, right? So and so it just showed that he didn't have any real practical real world experience, and he was the head of the graduate department. Again, it's not a slight, it's just sort of to be aware of the particular skill set of university professors in
I mean, that's a system,
yes,
that's a system right there.
And so, but it would be the same sort of consideration when you're talking about, if you're doing like a daylight basement in a hillside, you're either going to carve out what was there and then put your slab down on on the lower portion, and then your foundation is going to act as a retaining wall for the cut away area. So that's one approach. Another approach would be to build up, right? But then you would probably have a foundation here and a floor that's like a self-supporting floor structure, because to add, to build a foundation here and then fill this whole area, you'd have to mechanically compact and keep compacting that soil to get it to where you could do it, but it takes a lot of like mechanical compacting, and so probably wouldn't have been done very much in the past. That sort of thing. If you were going to pour a slab, like if you were going to do like a concrete floor up at this level, it's not practical.
Right. Well, were they even doing concrete floors in the 1890s, early 1900s?
I mean, maybe down like in the basement again, like as a slab on grade. But when you have concrete floors back then, usually they had these really cool systems where they would have like joist beams going out like this, and either large old growth timbers or at some point steel, and then they would have, and you can see them in the old buildings where they have like brick arches, right, between the beams, and that's creating like this sort of arch effect that they would then pour the floor on top of.
A structural.
Yeah, but out of brick. Basically brick arches to create that structure, as opposed to what we do now, which is like reinforced cement, right? With steel reinforced cement.
Right. Yeah, it's just funny. The base, every house has a basement in the world, and all these buildings have half buried basements, but it's not taught at all in the architecture schools, university.
Yeah, and then you have these really strange anomalies where you have windows in the basement that are below grade and would open out into, if you took the window away, the dirt would come in.
Totally. And that that's the basement that I'm definitely referring to, is these one, I mean, like, it doesn't even, for me, it doesn't even take like a builder's mind to think that like having a window on the ground floor that opens up like on level is a really dumb idea, because it's just going to come right in the fucking window.
Yeah, and here you have those all over Seattle too, and Port Townsend. I came to find out these windows that cut down into like below the sidewalk level, and in a rainy region like this, it just it doesn't make any sense. So it definitely indicates, or it seems to indicate, that there was some kind of event that raised the street level. Now in Port Townsend, I came across an article from the Port Townsend Leader, which has been their newspaper for 130 years or something, and they're still in their original headquarters. And that's called the Fowler Building. That was supposedly one of the earliest buildings. It was built in 1874. And in their own newspaper, they wrote an article about their own building. In the basement, there's a window that's buried. And what the journalist who wrote the article supposed was that window was buried because as they continued to build the city, they were excavating around this building, and the street levels would continue to rise due to they just suppose that they threw the excavated soil out into the street. I'm like, this makes no sense at all, because every new building would just like have a higher, elevation.
Yeah, I would never. And you can't just like throw dirt on the street and it's automatically a road.
Right.
I mean?
It had to
like,
be compacted and so forth. So it did
spread around.
You'd have wagon wheels getting stuck in it and horses sinking into it. And it just doesn't make any sense.
Not to mention that like
donkeys don't like walking in mud, that's for sure.
Not to mention your neighbor would be pretty disgruntled if you just buried the side of his building with your dirt, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it just
Totally.
from a practical perspective and every which way you look at it, it's fantastical. But that's the story. They're sticking to it.
Right. It doesn't make sense to me. But
well, what doesn't make sense is I know out here in Watsonville that they if you just the street signs, if you just look at the historical side of Watsonville, like all those buildings were moved. And these aren't like small buildings, they're like big buildings. And they would just move a building to make room for another building. They would just move that building onto the other.
Lift it and move the building.
Yeah, but once again, in like the 1800s.
Well, they have the same story in Chicago that they elevated the city, like they physically lifted these buildings off the ground, like hundreds and hundreds of buildings, and these are not small structures.
No.
And the only thing you can find about it is drawings.
Right.
You don't.
Totally.
I haven't seen any actual photographs of it, and it was the early 1900s or something like that. So Chicago's another enigmatic place with a bizarre backstory. All of them, all the cities.
Yeah, I mean, everyone you look at, like from the Chicagos, New York, San Franciscos, all the way down to the Port Townsends and Watsonvilles.
Yeah.
That's how I know, when I started, like, you leave the Bay Area, you hit all these small towns, and it's like, find anomaly. And it's like, oh man, if this is happening this much in these small towns, like, that's the clue, that it's happening everywhere, everywhere.
Yeah. And so then you get to the next logical, as you flesh this out, the next point would be if history didn't unfold, with westward expansion the way we're told, and San Francisco didn't start in 1848, and if it's true that many of these structures were already here, that to me it answers at least one problem, which is why they're so quick to tear things down. It's like there's no like pride of ownership. It doesn't seem to be true at all that they, whomever they are, the establishment, the powers that be, the ruling class, what have you, that they actually built these structures, because 50 years later they're tearing them down. They can't tear them down fast enough. Like the 60s, I mean, it's just a shame, like what they did with what they called the urban renewal program. It was just actually urban demolition. I mean, you look at a city like Detroit, it's like stunning, like the exquisite quality of those buildings, and they're just it's otherworldly, like how bombed out it is and how much of it they just let go to ruin. But it makes sense in my mind. I mean, not in any justifiable way, but like just kind of logicking it out, it only makes sense that they don't care because they weren't responsible. They just claimed it, and well, it doesn't fit with their new way of doing things. It doesn't fit with the new grid system that they overlaid on top of what was already there. So if it's convenient to use it, use the Opera House, but when they're done with that and they're going to build a bigger, better, modern version of an arena or something, just knock it down.
Totally. And a big part of that is that you know, it's a land grab in and of itself. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just to knock that old shit down and build your own thing. And then, you know, that's yours.
Detroit's
right there.
Detroit's like a strange like case study in itself, even in what they're the planning that they do there anyways now. I mean, there's a monorail system, you know, it's like a Disneyland, but it's like a ghetto, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not like Disneyland, it's Detroit, like a burned out city with a monorail around it, you know what I mean?
A modern new monorail.
I don't know about how. I just remember it would take you through downtown to Greektown. And Greektown got casinos in it now, so it's like, you know, I've always like. But if you're down there and those buildings that are made out of stainless steel and stuff like that, you just like look up. There's like gargoyles. It's just amazing. It's an amazing city.
Mm.
When I look at it, you can almost feel the energy there still. You know what I mean? I can't even imagine what it was like in its heyday, where like it was like an average person was like considered really wealthy there working in factories. You know what I mean? It was like, in my opinion, it seemed to be like the modern day utopia of how great like building and all that was back then. And those buildings are amazing there.
Yeah. And it throws all of not just like the history books, but like our literature into question. It's like, because what we're told is everything was sort of like Charles Dickens, you know, squalor at that time.
Yeah.
But then we look at the buildings and it's like it is magnificent and it's glorious. And it's definitely, like, I look at architecture as a reflection of the consciousness of the age that created it, right? Along with that, the economic conditions and everything like that. So it's like, how do you have squalor as the rule? And I know things can coexist, like you're saying, there's this elaborate monorail and then, you know, poverty, so that can coexist, but you have to account for, you know, the artisan tradition, like a generational, this would have had to have been like generational, you know, tradesmen, like, you know, handing down these skills, you know, to their children over generations to produce what we're seeing. And so that indicates that there's just like a you know, like how much of our literature is orphans, right?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
I mean, just about everything.
Right. There's no stories about who built the cathedrals.
Right. If there was, it'd probably be about an orphan.
An orphan. Yeah, they carried the rocks, the scaffold.
But I mean, fucking, you know, even all these world fairs, like, you know, they make it sound like, you know, thousands of volunteers showed up with, you know, their fucking a piece of wood and some nails and put this thing together. But even like if they faked it like they claim they did as a Hollywood set, which is crazy, you know, you don't want people walking around on these Hollywood sets, but even if they fake, like they did a really good job at faking it, like, and it just don't, like, you can tell when they don't do a good job, because like those are buildings, or the photos are really hard to find, or they're not these, you know, they're not these the main buildings of the expo. And you know, for me to go back a little bit, you know, all these World's Fair cities like were, you know, they were like re-education, you know, narrative builders, but also there was like a ritual of destroying the old and with the new, you know, and they dress it up as, we're going to build these crazy extravagant temporary cities and destroy them afterwards, when, you know, really we know they're all there, and you know, they just restored them up, destroyed a lot of them, but they didn't destroy a lot of them. But it was like the ritual of it. It's like the out with the old and with the new. All these cities, and all of these cities, I've kind of been putting my mind around how they were sacrificed as well. Like obviously Detroit for sure, you know, was absolutely Nashville, sacrificed. Yeah, Nashville, Oakland,
the Nashville World Fair, that the you know, it had that
the Parthenon building.
The Parthenon.
It's an exact replica. If it's even a replica, it's just it's the Parthenon.
Well, which one is the replica? The one in
Yeah.
This one or the other one, you know?
Yeah, it seems like each one of these world fairs left behind a relic, and it's almost kind of like it's like a wink and a nod. It seems like, you know, in Chicago you have the what is it, the Museum of Art and Industry or something like that right now, and you know, that was one of the supposedly temporary buildings, but they said they built that as a permanent building because that housed, you know, world-class multi-million-dollar art collection, so they had to build it permanent. But you look at that building, like, you didn't plan and build just that one building in 2 years, you know, accounting for Chicago winters and all that, and that's just one building. And if, like, let's just say they're not lying and all of them were temporary, so you built an entire city, or, you know, thousands of acres and hundreds of buildings in a record amount of time as a full-scale model, like buildings that were 11 and 14 acres
that you could walk on,
and go up a tower that's 250 feet high. That's going to withstand, you know, like the Windy City elements.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like movie sets, I've built movie and TV sets. They're built for the 2 weeks they're shooting.
Yeah.
Or even like the day they're shooting. You know what I mean? Like nothing is temporary about it.
In the elements for you know, a few years where
absolutely not. You can't.
People are occupying them.
You can't even build
bridges,
like that. Yeah,
running water, you know,
electricity.
Yeah.
The Chicago World Fair had 3 times the electrical generating power than all of Chicago at that time.
Wow. Yeah, I know. Just like the running water, the make sure that like that lake that they had out there, that pond didn't become like a swamp, you know. It's filters, the whole 9 yards. I mean, it was like a technology of the time, you know. You just don't build something, tear it down, and then go, oh, we're going to St. Louis next year to do this whole thing over again. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or, you know, whatever.
Right. Yeah, all over.
It's very secretive, in my opinion, like, you know, and there's not a real answer, because the answer that they give, that it was just not permanent, just doesn't stand up. It's just, I'm not 20 million people. 20 million, like what are you expecting next year? You know what I mean? It's like another 20 million.
Yeah,
where did these people even come from?
Here's a way of looking at that, like, it's not permanent thing. If you demolish anything, you can say it was temporary.
Right.
There's temporary.
Exactly.
Knocked it down, see?
Yeah. But you know, I mean, and then what, like, so maybe they just dug it out, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. And it's like being comfortable with the mystery. You know, we don't have all the answers. We just have a lot of really good questions.
Yeah.
And
they dug it out, and then they just they dug it out and they wired it up. I mean, because, you know, they dug it out, they wired it up, plumbed it, all in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
As a full-scale model that would be occupied by
painted it
tens of thousands of people. Yeah.
And
brought in all the exhibits.
Yeah, the exhibits and like these sculptors and, like, you know.
Yeah.
Hired people for 6 months to take care of 20 million people. Right. You know. But, you know,
I mean, it's a joke. It's a joke.
Classroom size is too big, though. You know, that's why, you know, 35 kids is too much to handle. So I don't know. It's just, you know, to me, and then just to do it like in San Francisco, and, you know, also have a San Diego World's Fair going on the same time.
St. Louis, Omaha.
Yeah. Memphis.
Yeah. No, the past is a lot more, it's a lot more marvelous than they would let on. And yeah, I could spend the rest of my life looking into this, and I think that's kind of what's going to happen.
No, totally. I mean, there's been no letting up on my end either. Like, I mean, you know, every day, you know, there's new discoveries. Like, that's the thing, you know, every town you look at, every fucking building you look at, like, there's
going to be
questions. There's going to be questions.
And that's what I was saying before. Like I got into this looking at like the Egyptian stuff, and like it's the first megalithic stone that I saw in Egypt with, you know, clear evidence of like a high speed, you know, boring hole in it, like a high speed drill hole going several feet into, you know, pink granite. And it's like they could not have done that with crude tools. You needed to have advanced high speed drilling to do that. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, like none of what we told makes sense anymore. And then it just went from there. And then, I mean, that was a bunch of years ago. And then it was like, things just kept opening up. And then all of a sudden I realized like, holy crap, this is right in front of me. It's all around. It's every town, pretty much every city across the country has a mystery that, you know, is just waiting to be explored. And
it really is.
Yeah,
there really is.
Lost civilization.
Hey, I found that
that
map. Actually, can I show you that map that I was?
Yeah, dude.
It actually.
Bring it up.
Yeah, sorry about that before, but this actually was the one that I was looking for. I was doubting myself. Here, check this out. Have you seen this one?
Yeah.
You have? Cool.
I have.
This is 1868, and I right like down here it says entered according to the Act of Congress, the year 1868, in the office of the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. Okay, so this is an official document. So this is only 20 years after that gold nugget was found, right?
Right.
I mean,
totally.
How many cathedrals are here already?
I mean, this is pretty much the same skyline and city line as that 1877. So this just shortens it.
Yeah, this is
again,
20 years.
So 20 years. There's no, I mean, dude, tell me people did this in 20 years in 1848 to 1868 while they were, you know, people were during the gold rush leading up. I mean, this is during right after the Civil War right here.
Right. This is at the end. This is exactly at the end of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And what is this? Is this that? I wonder if this is that tower that we saw burning. That's like a skyscraper right there.
I'd have to scroll back out on this.
No, it looks like Market
no.
Street.
Oh, you know what? Oh, that's interesting. So that building that you had the picture of burning was on Market Street, which is that huge diagonal street coming through.
This here?
Yeah.
That'd be Market Street?
Yeah. And so like the famous video of them coming down Market Street from right before the quake.
Yes.
It's from like right where, like, you know, your hand is going towards the water.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah, and then that ferry building is right there at the end.
Okay, I see.
And so that building was on there somewhere. I'm not sure what that big ass fucking tower is there.
Yeah, it's like a skyscraper. I mean, cathedrals are not small structures. Like,
and that cathedral down there. Yeah, I haven't tried to compare this one, but the Call building was a newspaper, the Call. Yeah, it was one of the early newspapers. It might maybe did Hearst own that?
Like I was trying to like pick out like where they have the Capitol, the city hall right there too. If you like look right there.
Where'd that be?
Look
pretty close to your hand. Yeah, go in.
Like over, then to the left.
To the left?
Yeah, right there. Right there.
This is where the Capitol would be?
Yeah, right there. No, over like more to the right. Up, right there. Right there. Boom.
Huh.
No, yeah. I think that's
you don't think that's the Capitol?
No, the Capitol is like right off Market. Like directly to the right of where your hand is, like that little open space, not to the left, a little more.
Yeah.
A little more up a little bit. See that little open? Yeah, like that's kind of like where the Capitol is.
And keep in mind, this is a document of what they wanted to document.
Totally, that's a thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that this is, and then just look like nothing else is built out anywhere except out here. That's the cliff house.
That's the cliff house.
Yeah, that's the first one. That's the first one, which looks very similar to the third one, which is the current one. Oh. Makes you think. And then that house there above it is, I think that's supposed to be Sutro Heights. So, okay, so like if you go back to the cliff house there, and then to the left of that, there's like some trail and that little barn house. That's where the Sutro bathhouses were.
Oh,
so then they're not showing it built, you know. I've always wondered if it was there. Yeah, this is a good one.
You really start wondering about timelines.
Totally. Cruise up to the top left corner to the yeah, like right to your left there. To that point. Yeah, that's like where the Golden Gate Bridge is.
Oh, okay.
Dude, scroll in there. So
that fort.
That's Fort Point. And that's
Presidio.
That's on the Presidio. And they built, so it's a trip. I mean, they're so fast to tear shit down, you know what I mean? So they're so quick to tear shit down. This was a fort that was built like, I want to say, well, clearly before 1868. It was built on top of a Spanish Starfort. And when they built the Golden Gate Bridge, they literally built it across the top of it. They didn't tear it down. They literally, like right there on to the right of it, there's like for instance, they literally built it over the top of it, which to me just says it's like a really important site.
So there's a Starfort in here.
It was underneath the one that's there right now, Fort Point.
The battery, whatever.
They built it like when John Fremont, so we got 10 minutes. When John Fremont and like Kit Carson sailed into the bay, they came down, they didn't come through the Golden Gate, which is this right here on the left right here. That's where this is the Golden Gate. They came down, if you go up, they came down through this way with, like, this is a Sacramento River up here, comes into the bay.
This here?
Yeah. And so they came in here and saw it, and they saw the ruins of a fort. And if you look at the maps, like it's a pointed Starfort. Which supposedly the Spanish built in the 1700s or something. But it was even like John Fremont and their narrative is saying it was ruins. And so they built Fort Point. I mean, I think possibly for the Civil War. I can't quite remember right now.
So they like navigated through the Sacramento River, huh?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they came down. That's how they discovered the bay.
And so if there was, Spanish were here building Starforts, I mean, maybe there was Spanish here building, or maybe there was Russians here, maybe, or maybe there's Tartarians, who knows? But building...
for sure. I mean, the idea that I would postulate is that all this city was like pretty much there. You know what I mean? Like, and that panoramic that you showed was probably like from after them restoring it all, cleaning it all up,
That it definitely seems to be the case.
Totally. From whatever year that actually is, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, I mean, come on, like there's no way, like a lot of people, have postulated this. There's no way a city this big, you're not going to be able to keep people off the streets. Like,
no,
it's just, it's like, even in their backyards, like you can't even, like people can't even do Google maps without like someone like popping out, waving.
There's no laundry. There's no laundry hanging. There's nothing.
There's no smoke coming out of any of the trees.
Yeah.
So, and there's that one donkey down there on the cart in the center.
Yeah.
In the center down there. But where's the guys? Like, where's the people?
Right.
you know, what,
And
I
then
mean,
people say, well, it's because photography didn't capture motion. And
no,
like, no, there's plenty of photos where you see people and they're in motion, but you can make them
no,
out.
yeah, no, I mean, I mean, you can look at plenty of photos from before this of people walking where they look perfectly still.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, that's a myth of the photo trade, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just,
And how, I mean, how, okay, so just even think about that. So someone wants to argue that, oh, well, you know, the technology wasn't good enough, so they just told everybody to stay inside that day. Okay, how did they tell everyone in this entire fucking city to stay inside that day?
I
They
mean,
didn't even, you know.
we have a living example of that, you know, with, with the whole lockdowns that we just went through. And it's like,
Well, sure, but
I didn't stay inside all day. I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that, man.
well, exactly. And they did that through television and news and everything. They didn't have TV, they didn't have phones, you know, they barely had telegraphs.
I mean, look at
They
this.
barely had printing presses, you know. Were they going to flyer the entire city and saying, hey, on this day, could you please go inside? Please, for the love of God, we need to take a picture of the city. Just
Right.
stay, please stay inside this day. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Doesn't that look like that tower we were looking at?
It does. That's the tower.
It does seem like it, right?
Or
You know,
wait,
hang on a second, because
yeah,
there's a
that
better
that might be
resolution
the
one.
tower, because
I think this
that
better resolution here.
that's Yerba Buena Island, where Treasure Island is.
Where did it go? I thought this was the same photo, but better resolution. Is this
And
a
that's
different?
Alcatraz right there.
This one here?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Angel Island's right behind that.
Wow. Just mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, even if like you
There it
believe
is.
everything, it's like, you know,
Yeah, what is
Yeah.
that?
that could be, it's hard to say, because the angles can kind of change a lot with the Yerba Buena. But even look at that, like, I mean, dude, even so, like, what kind of industry? I thought this was the gold rush. I thought we just had the Civil War. Like, what kind of
Right.
industry are they using in that gigantic warehouse?
I mean, you've got, this is like a 7-story, I don't know, something, apartment block or office building next to, oops.
I mean, you couldn't build that in fucking 10 years if you tried, just through the bureaucratic nonsense nowadays, you know?
No. And in Seattle, like the plot thickens when you realize they didn't even have a railroad. They weren't connected to the Transcontinental Railroad until like much later, into the 1890s at the earliest. And, you know, and you couldn't get through the Cascade Mountains. You know, there was like cart roads at best and trails.
I mean, how did they log and get the timber to the town? Look
Well,
at these cathedrals.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I'm jumping around, but dude,
It's hard
Yeah,
not
no.
to.
yeah. I mean, you know,
Yep.
Plus add in negotiating for the like materials.
I mean, I was,
It's
you know,
gotta
I'm
be
not,
just everything.
yeah,
Yeah, you're a contractor, right? You know how hard it is just to get like a house built, let alone
Yeah.
lay out an entire city grid, right?
Looking
All of
for
the
like,
infrastructure
oh
that
yeah, exactly. I mean, who's even like there had to be some kind of city infrastructure, otherwise it'd be a total chaos. Like people
Mhm.
just
and
be
it built
building
like
stuff wherever.
if you built that much stuff, the delays in product would just, I mean, just even nowadays, if you're doing like anything, it's like there's delays all over the place. I can't get
I mean,
windows. Who's gonna build all the windows? Where's all
look
the
at
sand?
Man,
look at how everything is a retaining wall. Like that, you know, this
yeah.
building goes down and then there's this strange stair
Mhm,
that goes up, right? All over the place, these retaining systems.
mhm.
Like
Oh, totally.
to go back to your question
those,
And
about
that concrete.
and those churches are massive, which would mean that it was populated with people, not having people on the streets. I mean, like
Well, I
I don't
mean,
get
why
it.
would you need to build that cathedral right there when there's that one right there?
Right.
You know
Right.
what I
This
mean?
one over
Unless
here.
there is like, yeah.
And there's
yeah,
another one
that
right
one
there.
Yeah, it's like,
You know,
okay, like really, there was that many people here,
and then right, that thing in the
or there was at one
in
point.
the background's a big old thing too. Look at that thing right there.
There's
Wow, that
another
right
one.
there.
Yep.
Gosh. There's another one right. I mean, they just are.
I mean, it's like dreamland, right? It just.
Mhm. It doesn't even look that cool anymore.
Oh,
Hey,
I'm
there's
sure.
a commercial break coming. Do you guys want to run again, or are we?
I
we
think
need
I
to
better
call it
get to the kids.
All right.
All right, that's 9.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Well,
all
Dodd,
right,
I
dude.
mean, I'd be stoked to do this again.
Hell yeah.
I definitely had some cement kind of tidbits to throw in, but we could save that for another time.
Yeah, let's do
I
it
just-
again, man. This has been fun.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, this
Right
was
on.
awesome. Hell yeah.
All right, Matthew. Nice meeting you, man.
Really.
Pat, great to meet you as well. Casey, it's been a
Cool.
pleasure. Yeah,
Yeah,
real
man.
honor. Thank you.
Dude, thanks for coming on with us. This was outstanding.
Excellent.
Fantastic. We'll
Hell
pick
yeah,
it up
man.
the next time. Take
All
care,
right.
fellas.
All right.
Later, guys.
Bye-bye.